by 12:15, 12:20, he was sitting in the triage from 12:20 onward till about, I would say, 8:50 on till about 8:50 in the night. He was sitting in the triage, complaining of constant chest pain. His BP constantly kept on rising with the last recorded blood pressure of 210. He was taken inside. He was only prescribed Tylenol during the entire waiting time that he was outside, and he was not given help. They said that chest pain is not considered acute problem. They do not suspect a cardiac arrest. When he came inside, he was asked to sit down. He got up for a fraction of second and he collapsed. He fainted, and the nurse was heard saying that I do not feel a pulse. So basically, the hospital administration, the employees of Grey Nuns Hospital have basically killed my husband, Prashant Sreekumar, by not providing him timely medical help. And the security was so rude that instead of addressing the cause, they said, "Ma'am, you are being very rude." So basically, it is okay for them to kill a human being and to tell the wife that you are being rude. Thank you.
The thing is that it was just a friction of second that I must have just turned. He stood up and he said in Hindi, he said, "Niharika, mujhe chakkar aa rahe hain," which means that, "Niharika, I'm dizzy." And Papa held him from one side. I tried to hold him from the other side just to, which we did. And this is how he fell on the floor. He fell on the floor, right? From these hands. I'm not able to take that out from my brain. And I tried. I said, "Prashant, wake up, Prashant." And then this nurse, then all of a sudden everybody came. He said, "Oh, I need help. He has no pulse." They put hand here. They said, "He has no pulse." And then rest is history. I don't know how I'm going to financially sustain my family. I don't know how I'm going to emotionally sustain my family. Nobody, nothing can ever replace Prashant in our lives, in our hearts. But that has caused a lifetime damage. I was enjoying my life. Now I'm going to just live every day, hoping that it would pass. You know how hard it is to spend the night, hoping that he would come back, remembering all that happened to him. It is traumatic. I loved him so dearly. He was not only my husband, he was my only friend in this country.
All right, good evening. This is the Cārvāka podcast. Welcome to Canada. And I wanted to start today's podcast by playing those two clips. The first clip that you saw was from the hospital. I have to say, Prashant's wife has shown tremendous poise while she was at the hospital. I don't know what I would have done. Niharika was very poised at the hospital. I would have probably broken the whole hospital down if it was me. That's just me. That's my personality type. I'm kind of aggressive when something like this happens. But she, the poise she showed at the hospital is unbelievable. So the story is that they went to the hospital. Prashant kept on complaining, going to the ER, kept on complaining that, "Listen, I have a problem. I'm not feeling well." There were moments where he had actually collapsed and he was just lying on the floor, and all the hospital could do is tell him that you're creating an inconvenience for others, is what the hospital could tell them. And this is not just a one-off story. I'm sharing all these things so that we can lay the groundwork for what's happened. There are multiple other stories. It's not just about Prashant. So, there are others that have happened. There was the daughter says mother died after 30-hour ER wait at Grace Hospital, prompting review and political clash at the legislature. This was a grandfather's sudden death in Laval ER after not seeing doctor for 11 hours under investigation. Then we had chat, Christopher Giffen, 49, died after being brought to the hospital by ambulance. And I think this one had made rounds on social media. The tragic death of Adam. He died from an aneurysm after giving up on a 6-hour wait. And I remember he tweeted about it, and it's endless. Like an Ontario couple lost their teenage son after an 8-hour wait in ER. They want law reform. Um, and it's endless. Like I can share so many others. In Moncton, in the hospital ER, we had a 13-hour wait. I wanted to show multiple news outlets, because it's not just a one-off thing. It's consistent now, and there are different reasons. And I have Darshan, Maharaja, and Kirk Lubimov with me today to talk about it. Guys, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
So I mean, I don't know. It's the worst thing to ask. Like, where do we start? Like, how do we start? How do I even frame a conversation like this? See, the families involved, right? They have lost their near and dear one. They're never going to recover from the loss. So in a situation like this, like I always put myself in a situation like this. I am very honest. I would have torn the whole hospital down. I literally would have torn the whole hospital down, because I've lost someone I care for. And unfortunately, in this woman's case, I think the husband must be the biggest support system of the house in terms of finances too. And now the family, and they have 3 children, and I don't know how the family is going to recover from that. But okay, I'll come to Darshan first. So Darshan, how do we frame this problem?
It's a problem of ideology, because believing in the superlativeness of Canadian healthcare system is an ideological imperative in Canada. So what happens is, as you pointed out, all those examples, and I remember the older ones also. There was this lady in Quebec hospital. She was First Nations. Also another elderly gentleman in Manitoba, again First Nations. So at that time, it was said that this is because of racism. At that point, I didn't have much information on the working of the healthcare system. But what happens is that, just like James Bond's vodka martini, we are shaken, not stirred. Nobody is stirred into action, because the moment you try to bring about some change in this system, straight away the ideological stone wall is hit. Then there are accusations that the con premiers have underfunded healthcare. I mean, Kushalji, I have written 13 articles examining each and every single aspect, like doctor shortage, nurse shortage, underfunding, you name it. There are problems of entry, but there are also problems of exit. So in a normal situation, it went extreme during COVID, but in a normal situation, patients who have recovered in the hospital cannot be discharged, because there is nowhere to send them to. Long-term care homes, what we call old age homes in India. There is nowhere to send them to. Kids are living somewhere else. They have to go back to some other facility where they have some reasonable level of attention and care. And there is nowhere to send them to. The average stay is 60 days. So if someone says that we don't have enough beds available, some of those beds which are occupied could be occupied by people who have recovered from whatever they came to the hospital for. So there are, so many different aspects to this mess. But you can't address any of them, because the moment you say that this needs to be improved, then all the arguments that have been doing the rounds for 30-40 years will be trotted out again. You will get bogged down. Some of them will bring you face to Brandolini's law, where there is so much BS in that argument of one sentence that you will spend 1 hour explaining why it is BS, right? The biggest problem is people believing that this is the best healthcare system in the world, which ironically no other country has tried to emulate. I mean, that should lead to a simple question as to whether it is the best one or not. Right? And then whichever party is in government will say that the previous government underfunded healthcare. It's an impossible puzzle to solve, Kushal. I'm convinced that this cannot happen unless the system collapses completely, because it is held together by duct tape. The moment you remove the duct tape, the system collapses, then something can be built. But that's the only way I see.
Kirk, you've been very critical. I know, Kirk. I've followed your write up. You basically want to nuke a lot of things in Canada in terms of systems. But what do you make when it comes to healthcare?
Well, the examples you gave, and as Darshan talked about as well, there are many examples of this. Let's remember, over 23,000 Canadians die every year waiting for healthcare. So those are people that just a stat. Okay, just to give you this in perspective, about 325,000 people, Canadians, die every year in general. So 7% of Canadian deaths come from people just waiting for healthcare. And we are still pounding our chest pretending we have the best healthcare in the world, right? And if you add the euthanasia to MAID system to it, which is another about 5% of Canadian deaths, we have about 12% of Canadian deaths every year attributed to lack of access to healthcare, which is absolutely insane, right? It's completely inappropriate considering we're paying an average of $7,000 to $9,000 per year in taxes for it. So the question is, why not give people the choice and say, okay, if your cost per dollar is, $700 a month, let's say, have options. You can use that for insurance to go to private healthcare, or offload the system. Give people choices. The whole point of a choice is to reduce congestions in one system, and this is one thing that, for some reason, Canadians just don't get. Especially to politicians that are stuck with the public healthcare system monopoly. If we give Canadians choices, it will take the pressure off one aspect of our healthcare system, and that's one of the easiest way to get rid of this, deaths and waiting lists. It's and those stats come. So Canada has tons of health regions, right? Canada's healthcare is broken down to different health regions, and none of the health regions share data together. So the stats that we have are basically very accurate guesstimation, but it's not a data-driven, result. So the actual numbers could be even higher. So we don't even really know what's actually happening to healthcare, and this is one of the issues we have in Canada, and it's something I wrote about before as well. But we need solutions, and one of them is the actual ER management in itself. You go to an ER clinic in Canada, and it's essentially it turned into a walk-in clinic. It's not an emergency clinic anymore, which is what it's supposed to be. And it's because there are not enough, I guess, doctors in Canada. But it's not because we don't have enough doctors. It's because we don't give licenses or expedite licenses as a focus point for Canada. You can't say we're going to immigrate doctors from different parts of the world and say, okay, well, it'll take you 5 years to become a doctor here. Well, it's like, well, do you have a shortage? Do you need doctors or you don't? And there's obviously a lot of merit tests and everything else that they need to do, but why would they need to go back to schooling and redo courses that they have done 20, 30 years ago? It just makes no sense. So we just need a different system here to actually empower and certify and recognize talent when it does come to Canada. And it's, and we see that issue across vast different industry, not just healthcare in general.
So what I find baffling is, like, see, India might have a lot of problems. Access to healthcare is actually not that much of a problem in India. So what India has done is actually something like what you're talking about, Kirk. It's a public-private mishmash. So yes, India has a lot of poor people who cannot afford private healthcare. So the government has government hospitals where basically now we can say that we need to increase the number of government hospitals, and in fact, just recently the current government created a scheme in India where even now senior citizens above the age of 65 or 70, I have to check my age number, but they will get healthcare up to, let's say, 500,000 Indian rupees, and it doesn't matter who that person is. Any senior citizen in India gets that cover. It's a scheme just launched, and obviously poor people, like I'm from Mumbai. Just like growing up, I remember like Sion Hospital. Sion is a place in South Mumbai where you would go. It's a government hospital. Yes, the lineups are insane, but the people who don't want to go to a government hospital, there's private healthcare, and you have an option. I can go to a private one. I can go to the public one. Like I remember running my business in Mumbai for 20 years before I became a full-time podcaster. I used to clearly remember there were moments, members of my um, of my team who used to be like, oh, this time I did not go to the government hospital. I was in a hurry. Yes, it cost me, but I went to a private hospital. It was a very common discussion amongst the people who want, like in my case, I would always go to the private hospital. I'm not going to lie, but I come from a different financial strata of society. What I find annoying is Canada robs you of that option. Canada says, no private players, only the government will be a player. Like, why not have both is what I'm not able to understand, Kirk. What happens? Are the heavens going to fall if there is a private hospital?
Well, you see, a lot of Canada is driven by unions, right? So unions say jump, and politicians from both sides say how high. So it's that is one of the hardest things to break through, right? Because every aspect of a hospital in Canada is union driven, right? From the floor cleaners, from the food providers to nurses to doctors. Everything has some kind of association to with it or a union. So that is one of the hardest things to do. It's really bizarre. Like in general, I don't think healthcare should be for profit, like in the way it is in the US. But it doesn't mean that we can't have both system in place and give people the option. It's it just doesn't make any sense. You can't say our hospitals are overrun. Okay, well, let's give someone the choice to go somewhere else. And it's like, no. Okay, well, do you want the hospitals to be overrun or not? Right? Like, let's just remember what hospitals in general is supposed to be served, right? They're supposed to be serving the people that actually have a serious medical need. But we don't give people the option to go anywhere else to treat everything below that. So of course, hospitals, people go to where it's the most expensive place by osmosis for taxpayers to get, a sniffle looked at. It's absolutely insane. Like I've been to ER a bunch of times in the last, especially since having young kids. Like one of my daughters just broke her collarbone recently, and we're in ER, and she got treated in a hallway for it. It's absolutely insane. Like I didn't find it a big deal because I knew exactly what was wrong. We got an X-ray right away. But you sit at the ER, and there are people sleeping there. There are kids running around. It's like, okay, you should be in ER if you pretty much, have something broken, bleeding, and need stitches. You're, not because you have a temperature and you need a doctor's note. So we have so much opportunities to offload and make the expensive healthcare cheaper, but we're just too stuck up in a system that, and ideologies just won't let us do anything else.
Yeah, you see,
Okay,
there is this Dr. Brian Day in British Columbia who wanted to start private facilities for, as a hospital, and he was prevented by the government, said no, you can't do it. So he went to court, the British Columbia Court of Appeals. His argument was that preventing people from accessing healthcare violates their charter right under Section 7 and Section 15. And the British Columbia Court of Appeals agreed that there is a charter right violation going on here, but that the violation is justified. Now, this is the ultimate roadblock, right? Where the court says that, yeah, you're right, there is a constitutional rights violation happening here, but it is justified in the interest of fundamental justice. Now, how do you
You
get
deserve
around-
to die, sir. That's what the courts are saying.
Yeah,
And if I can add some context, that's ironic considering the British Columbia government buses people, used to take people down to the US for
Yes.
cancer care, for healthcare in private clinics because they couldn't tend to them.
yeah. So you see,
So
according to Canadians, there are only two models of healthcare in the world, or possible even. One is the Canadian, and the other is the US model. Like, look at Europe, look at Australia. I was talking to a family physician,
Switzerland have they
Switzerland.
checked out Switzerland?
right? I was talking a few years ago, I was talking to a family physician who is licensed in Canada, in Italy, and in Australia. And she said that, if I send a requisition for a CT scan in the morning, by afternoon, I have the report. And here in Ontario, the average wait time for an MRI is 89 days.
Oh, I have a clip for you. I have a clip for you. Let me play it. Listen to this shit show.
Code Blue, room 305.
Ontario has the fewest hospital beds per person of any province in Canada, and it's almost at the bottom of all OECD countries. Ontario funds its hospitals at the lowest rate per person of all the provinces. Why are we okay with this? As a patient with chronic conditions, I deserve better from my government.
So it's basically more government funding. They just want
Okay.
more and more and more and more and more.
I will refer your viewers to my article titled Canada's Healthcare System is Not Underfunded. That is the title, where I have cited data from StatScan, from Canadian Institute of Health Information, from OECD, all official sources. And when I posted that article on Twitter, I got replies saying your data is wrong. No, it's from the original sources, the authentic sources. Now, here's the data. You look at any province, roughly 40 to 43% of their budgetary spending will be on healthcare. If you include all the spending of federal, provincial, and municipal governments in Canada, 1/3 of all spending is on healthcare. As of 2024, 12.6% of GDP was being spent on healthcare. That is $1 out of $8. So how much, and the system is in tatters with that level of spending. So if you want it to be even reasonably functional, not top of the line like Germany's, even reasonably functional, how much more funding should be given to it? Because you're spending like $1 out of every $8 of GDP on your healthcare. So you want to devote half of GDP to healthcare? No, it's not sustainable, because the problem is not funding. The problem is unwise spending. That lady was talking about OECD. Let me give you some numbers. As of 2019, OECD average of hospital beds per 1,000 people was 5.0. Canada was at 2.5. So if Ontario is lower than the Canadian average, that is like a meaningless difference to me. Japan had 13. South Korea had 11.6. So Japan also has an aging population, just like Canada, probably more aged than ours, right? Same with South Korea. They have invested in technology, they have invested in physical capacity, and they have a well-functioning system. Here we are throwing money at it, more than about $300 billion a year, and it's not functioning anywhere near satisfaction. See, there was this case in Manitoba of a person who was who needed spinal cord surgery, and he had been on a waiting list for 4 years. Now, Manitoba at that point had 7 surgeons who were qualified to operate on spinal cord. So, why is there a waiting list? If you have, because spinal cord surgery cannot be all that routine like influenza, where the doctors are, overworked. No, it's not like that. I'll tell you where the, bureaucratic nonsense comes in. There was a few years ago, there was a case of 2 ladies in, I think, New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, who had some kind of a special skin issue. And there wasn't a doctor who was qualified to treat them in the province. So they requested permission, saying right across the border in the US state of Maine, we can get this treatment. So would the province's health plan cover that? And they were told that, yeah, the province's health plan can cover that, provided it is certified by a doctor in our province who is qualified to do this procedure. They said, there isn't anyone, which is why we are going to Maine. If there is no one to treat us, how can there be someone to certify that there is no one to treat us? This is the kind of bureaucratic nonsense where, the whole system gets bogged down. I mean, it's only one of the ways in which the system gets bogged down. There are multiple other ways.
This reminds me of the story of the lady in Saskatchewan that got viral, who's been waiting to see a doctor for 7 years, and had been laying in bed in pain. I don't remember exactly what medical condition she was, but it was really famous, like case a couple weeks ago, because the US has picked it up, and Glenn Beck has offered to fly her to the US to get a surgery. Yeah, and so she was waiting. So there's only one person in Saskatchewan that could operate on her, but she could get a referral out of Saskatchewan for someone to operate her, but she can't get an appointment with the doctor to get a referral because the doctor is his clinic is full of patients, and she's been waiting in 7 years, essentially bedridden in pain, and it's like, so you're telling me no doctor can stay extra 10 minutes past the clinic hours for 7 years to give this lady a piece of paper? Like, it's just borderline inhumane. Like, it's absolutely insane. Like, I've walked with my dog 10 minutes before the emergency clinic at the vet was closing, and they took care of him. And you can't treat a human in this country. I really don't get that part at all.
No, you said borderline inhuman, but I think it is actually inhuman, because she had applied for assisted dying and been approved, which is when the case blew up. And then Glenn Greenwald, I think it was, who stepped in saying this is not right and we are looking for options. And then I think over a couple of days, everything was arranged except that she didn't have a passport. And then the Saskatchewan premier, who had the gall to say that, like something like we have to look at this, or some kind of a word salad. So that's where it is. It's no longer about treating people.
Yeah. The wild thing about this case is that it hit the news the first time like a couple of years ago, and nothing has changed since then. It was CTV, I think, did an article on it and an actual video on it in 2023, and here we are 2 years later, and nothing changed with that lady from a healthcare point, access point, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah, if you have, I'm sure you have seen videos of African wildlife where there is a herd of zebras grazing, and then a bunch of lionesses, prepare for hunt. When they're chasing, the whole herd disperses. And then once the lionesses have managed to hunt one zebra, everybody goes back to grazing.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly the behavior of Canadians when it comes to such news about the mess that the healthcare system is in. When something is in the reports, then everybody will be talking about it like the herd of zebras scattering, and then they go back to their grazing. Right? There
That
is,
unfortunately is the case with every news cycle.
yeah, but on something as crucial as this, when we don't have an option. See, if there is an option of a private healthcare, I may take the hit financially. And okay, there have been cases where somebody else took the hit. There is a condition of the eye called keratoconus, where the person goes blind, and typically this happens in late teens. So it's especially tragic when that happens. Now, the treatment for keratoconus has existed for many years, decades, I think. And it is not covered by the Ontario's health plan, OHIP. So there was a case of a boy about 17 or 18 years of age who had got keratoconus, and then it hit the headlines saying, this is not covered and province won't cover the cost of treatment in the US. So some good Samaritan paid for it. And his was not the only case. Earlier, when that hit, then people were digging into this information. Few years ago, there had been a case in Montreal where this had happened to a young lady, and someone stepped in. And these people don't even want to be named. And it's back then it was costing like $18,000 or $20,000, and they just contacted the newspaper saying, "I'm willing to pay it. Just put me in touch with the patient." And they paid, and they made it a specific condition saying, "Please don't mention my name." So as long as the patient or their family or some good Samaritan is willing to take the hit, why shouldn't the option be available? That is a question that has never been adequately discussed in Canada.
Yeah. You know what the shocking bit was in this entire process is a person who was there at the ER. They posted this. I was there. He begged for help, and they told him to go sit down and wait every time he approached the desk. He was on the floor asking time and time again, and they said he needs to get away from the area for the other patients' privacy as they were checked in. He was pacing and dry heaving while tapping his chest, clearly in distress. I never want to see that side of that ER again. I know what I saw. It's shocking. It's unfathomable that in a country like Canada you would have something like this.
Okay, you have to stop saying in a country like Canada, frankly, because that may have been applicable 20, 30 years ago, but it's not. This is the kind of country we have on our hands now, where this kind of mess is routine. So maybe we should stop saying in a country like Canada. We are not.
By the way, we have a doctor watching us live. So I'm a surgeon in Manitoba. Things are getting bad. The federal and provincial governments really need to take drastic steps and allow a hybrid model. We are heading for a collapse within 5 years. This is a doctor saying that.
Yeah.
The tweet of the I guess spectator in the hospital, or the message wherever that was posted, the whole thing just pisses me off. Like, because I said I've been to the ER many times, and it's and I have a lot of family work in healthcare in Canada, and it just pisses me off because I know exactly what she saw, because I've seen similar, and I know exactly the kind of attitude that front desk people have given them, those people. I've seen it times and times again. And you see people clearly that are there for the correct reasons, that are, last time we were there with my daughter, like a lady behind us was checking in, like literally was getting wheeled on a wheelchair, half passing out, half not. And it's like, and there's a line that she's waiting in to check in. I'm like, I don't think the lady may have a line to wait to check in. Like, prioritize or take it in. Like, what are we talking about? Like, the person checking in and has 3 kids running around the hospital, they're playing games, and it is not in distress. This lady behind me is in distress. Bring her in. Like, it's just absolutely insane that there is no priority, There's no control of the ER rooms. This is the exact problem. One of my things that that Alberta is somewhat trying to fix now, after me raising it a million times, it's like, why is there 50 people showing up to an ER? Like, it's not a spectate sport. It's not a family reunion. It's like, hey, you have 1 or 2 people with you, and that's it. If the hospital is full, we can't accommodate 20 seats for 10 seats or 5 seats. And now at least there is a sign that says only have 1 or 2 immediate people with you. It's it pisses me off just to even think about it. And I just want to build on something Darshan was saying. It's absolutely correct. Like, for example, in Alberta, 38% of our budget goes towards AHS, towards healthcare. It's absolutely insane. So the question is not the billings that we're paying for it. The question is, how do we get accountability for it? Throwing more money into the system and saying, okay, what's the ROI? What's the KPIs? Who do we hold responsible? And nobody has an answer to that. We have nothing, right? We have absolutely, it's the only system in the world that operates with zero expectations from it, right? We just take in their word, like, hey, at least, it's free healthcare. It'll be there when you need it. Well, 24,000 people that died last year may have a different opinion on that. So this is what we need to change. Okay, sure, it'll be free healthcare, or the current healthcare system will be the biggest part of our healthcare forever in Canada. It's just the way it is, and there's nothing wrong with it. But can we at least have accountability and some kind of sense of, okay, what are we getting here for our dollar, right? If we're paying, $28 billion for healthcare, and we have the same amount of beds that we had 10 years or less, obviously we're not paying for more healthcare. We're paying for something else. So where's that money going to?
Good question. Because I think about a year or 2 ago, there was a news report about a new CT scan machine that had been installed in a hospital in either Barrie or Collingwood. I think it was Collingwood in Ontario. And the report said that the province was going to pay the operating expenses of the machine, but the capital cost of the machine had been paid via fundraising drive by the hospital. So, like, if Ontario is spending 42% of its budget on healthcare, does it not include equipment? Why do people have to pitch in as a charity to make that capital expenditure? See, another thing that Kirk said about the ERs being overrun. 1 in 6 Canadians does not have a family doctor. So in case of any medical issue, they have nowhere to go to. Number one. So they'll end up in ER. Here in Brampton, we have only 1 hospital. I think worldwide, we may have the record of having the lowest number of hospital beds per 1,000 people, because the last time I calculated, it was 0.94 instead of 2.5, which is the Canadian average. 0.94. After that, number of beds has not gone up, but population has gone up. So the number would have plummeted further still. The ER at that hospital is operating at 200% capacity of what it was built for, because so many people don't have a family doctor. Then Ontario government, in its infinite wisdom, made a rule that if you were attached to a family doctor and then if you visited a walk-in clinic, then you would be dropped from the list of patients at the family doctor's practice. Now, that family doctor's clinic may not be open when we need that medical attention. It is maybe late in the night, or so. In order not to be dropped from my doctor's list of patients, I have to go to ER. I can't go to a walk-in clinic which is still open at 11 p.m. I can't go there, because if I do, then there is a future cost to pay of not having a family physician. So I'll go to ER. So these are, the messy situations where everything adds to the load on the hospitals and their ERs. That is also a factor. It's not all the fault on the ER side. They also have points to talk about, which are valid.
So basically, it's not one problem, it's multiple problems, and they are having a cascading effect on each other. And and the net result is an absolute shit show. Like I remember, I think it's also a product of where you are placed. Like in Ontario, I know, like if you are in the GTA area or the surrounding areas, then access to healthcare is far, far tougher because of the sheer numbers. And I think we don't have the corresponding numbers of doctors available or nurses available to match that demand in the market. But if you, let's say, you end up going to Windsor or someplace else, I think the appointments are much faster. For example, if you want to get an cataract surgery done, right, in Toronto, the wait time is like 6 to 8 months,
No,
from what I've understood.
more than 12 months. And that is also iffy. I know from personal experience. I
Oh,
opted for private
congratulations.
surgery. I opted for private
Congratulations.
surgery. I said, I'm not going to sit around waiting while my vision deteriorates. And the doctor said, 12 months. But you know what happens is, this is something that I learned from that doctor, that that particular doctor gets 1 day in a week at the operation, at the OR, operation theater, at one particular hospital. And that operation will take maybe about an hour. So she's getting 1 hour a week of the use of that operation theater. So it's all basically, the problem is that when you allocate, and allocation is fundamental economics, the allocation, when it is based on money, it may not feel nice to a lot of people, but it works far more efficiently compared to when you are allocating treatment. Here we are allocating treatment. She said, it may be 12 months, it may be slightly more, and this is the private option. So, yeah, sure, why not? I'll go for private. First of all, the lens is better. That's also a difference.
Yeah, but let's say in Windsor or other parts in and around Windsor, I think the wait times are much better for these
Yeah, but
kinds of
it depends on the province also. For example, in British Columbia, it's very routine for various hospitals to completely close their ER for a day or two, saying staff shortages. So,
What do you mean close their ER? The whole concept of an emergency room is that it's for
Yeah.
emergencies.
Yeah.
You just have to wait. If you are about to die, just wait a week until they come and reopen.
Yeah.
Don't you dare die! Don't you dare die!
No, yesterday or day before, I sent you 2 of those notifications, right? In British Columbia, 2 different hospitals. They said our ER will be closed. Now,
yeah,
the first time
they close a lot of wards. The kids' wards they'll close because the craziest part was last year in this one part of remote in BC in Stewart. It's it's on the border of Alaska in a mining town in general. There's a lot of mining development happening there, but the only not only you can't even call it a hospital. It's essentially a room, right? It's and they didn't have an ambulance, and they didn't even tell the mayor or anyone else until they found out that through a news report or something like that. That, oh, by the way, your town is not going to have an ambulance for the next few days, kind of thing. And then the mayor, it's like what? It's like, we have, if something happens at a mine, it's catastrophic, we need healthcare. If something happens on a road and there's no like any other towns, substantial towns within a 4-hour radius, we are at the end, we're at the only call. Yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, we forgot to tell you, sorry. And it's like,
No, the first time I heard of a news of this nature was, I think, around 2017 or 2018, when in Nova Scotia there was a communication put out, and I had a Facebook friend living there, so which is how I came to know. The hospital had put out a communication saying that our maternity ward is closed for the next 15 days or something like that. I remember the name of the area, Annapolis Valley. And they had said that if you are experiencing labor pains, then please go to this hospital, which was like 125 kilometers away. So if someone is having labor pains, it's kind of unreasonable to ask them to travel 125 kilometers so their baby can be delivered.
Yeah,
Right.
it's absolutely insane. I'll show you 1 second. Don't know if you can see, but this is the current wait time at the emergency hospitals in Calgary. So they range between 5 hours and 7 hours,
Mhm.
and it's it's 8 p.m. at night, right?
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be busy, but we have a 7, so someone's going to be sitting there until 4 or 5 in the morning, and hopefully someone will take a look at them.
Yeah.
It's, and this is like on the lower end.
Mm.
You can catch a flight to Mexico and see a doctor faster than that. It's it makes no sense, right? It's
True.
Yeah.
get
So from-
travel insurance and go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a very weird way, if I was a tourist and I have that North American health insurance, which I think costs around a 1,600 to 1,800 US a month, like the one I get for my parents when they visit. We get private insurance. We buy it in North America. We buy it in America. It works in Canada and America both. It's like a combination one because they travel to both countries. So they are better off than an average Canadian. What the hell? Like, how is it possible? They're better off than an average Canadian.
No, because see, that's the whole divide, right? That they are paying for private coverage, not private healthcare, but private coverage. Paisa feko, tamasha dekho. Throw the money and watch the show. Right?
Yeah, but give me that option, right? I'm just saying it straight up. Like, why doesn't Canada give that option? Why is Canada like, you die, only I will take care of you? Like, what the hell?
No, here is the irony of ironies, Kushalji. On one hand, British Columbia Court of Appeals said that the violation of charter rights is justified when people are kept interminably on waiting lists. But on the other side, the Supreme Court of Canada said that the government cannot violate the charter right to access death. That is a Supreme Court decision. Violating chart, and they are both the same sections, section 7 and section 15 of the charter. The court says that the government is justified in violating your charter right to access health care, but they are obligated to uphold your charter right to access death. This is where ideology ultimately brings you.
It's just, I think it's just, you start with the premise where you've already made up your mind, and then you keep making shit up to make,
Yes.
to justify your bullshit. We're talking about bullshit from one horrifying story to the other. I don't know if people followed this, and I'm going to connect it to Malad. So, unfortunate death once again. Toronto police had reported this. Shivank Avasthi, a 20-year-old student from India, he was just walking around Highland Creek Trail and Old Kingston Road. This is near the University of Toronto's Cārvāka campus. He was shot dead. We don't know anything as of yet. The Indian consulate is in touch with Toronto police and others. We also had other news. Now, I want to focus on, there are moments where you go, wait, what? And this was one of those news segments where, remember the 14 people caught for the extortion
Yes.
calls?
Yes,
Which
they applied
one?
for asylum.
The one, the BC one,
Oh yes, yeah.
they applied for asylum.
Hmm.
They're like, how can that happen? I mean, now I don't get surprised about these things in Canada. It's a gangster. Let me apply for asylum. And the best part of this scam, this entire scam, is they know that they know, but they still do it. They still do it. Like, imagine you're a gangster and you're applying that the Indian government is going to get after you. Well,
It's
why
not
is the
even
Indian
that you're
government after you?
criminally charged. You're criminally charged, and you still get to apply for asylum, and the government will still consider you. This is the whole thing. They'll be sitting the next 4 years because the asylum backlog is about 290,000 people. They'll be sitting for the next 4 years waiting for the paperwork to get processed and then decide if they get asylum or not. It's you can't even make this kind of stuff up. It's if there was a kind of like a Saturday Night Live show but just made up of Canadian news, it'll be the biggest show in the world. Like it's just you couldn't even make things up like that.
True, but I'll give you even wackier example. And this is a discovery I made when I was writing a series of articles on assisted dying, because that is also a big topic. So it needs, point-wise kind of analysis. Who is eligible to access assisted dying in Canada?
You basically are saying that who deserves to die?
Yeah. So you have to apply. Now, not many people will know that temporary foreign workers can apply for assisted dying. Right? But people who have been deemed inadmissible to Canada can apply for assisted dying.
So imagine, this is a new immigration scam. I entered Canada illegally. Now I apply for assisted dying. No, I'm not going back. I deserve to die.
People who have been deemed inadmissible to Canada for security grounds can apply for assisted dying.
Listen, we will take anyone's organs.
Yeah.
Nothing makes sense anymore. And this entire extortion thing that has blown up inside parts of Canada, and I know it's a selection bias and an algorithmic bias that only news from Surrey and Brampton are coming up. Honestly, it is there in Kelowna and other parts of Canada too. It's basically the mob has run amok in Canada. I think every 40 years, right, in societies, mobs come up because mobs tend to find newer ways of doing business. And in its latest rendition, the mobs have found a way in Canada. And it's all because of the stupidity of the Canadian government, where we've highlighted this, both Darshan and I, on this podcast multiple times, that an international student coming to Canada does not need police verification. While a person like me, who's a landed immigrant in Canada, had to go through rigorous police reporting and police background checks. Like my movement into Canada was scrutinized. I had to prove things. They gave me counter questions. Even it was a step-by-step process. I was made to prove my intent, but not an international student. You could be a gangster who can become a student in one of these phony diploma mills. You can just go there and then you're lost in the woods because Canada is so huge. It's like it's very easy to get lost in Canada if you think about it. And then and it's this video, although it's in Punjabi, and I'll do the translation for people. It's symptomatic of what the average person in Brampton feels. This was reported by Nitin Chopra. He runs this very good YouTube channel called Truth Pill. He's a Canadian journalist from Brampton, Mississauga, that area. And this is just a town hall in Brampton, and they're yelling in Punjabi at the reps, and they're fed up, like they're yelling at them.
सुनो ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਕਵਰ ਅਪ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, ਹੋਰ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ।
Excuse me. There's a line of questions.
ਇੱਕ ਮਿੰਟ ਭਾਜੀ,
There's a line of questions.
ਕੋਈ ਚੀਜ਼ ਰਿਪੀਟ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਬਾਰ
Allow me to ask a question.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਬਣਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ। ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਹੱਥ 'ਚ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਦੱਸੋ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਟਾਈਮ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਤੇ ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਪੀਰੀਅਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ ਬੁਲਸ਼ਿਟ ਖਤਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਜੋ ਰਿਜ਼ਾਈਨ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ। These should be the fucking question.
So I'll tell you what has happened here. As always, these town halls that are done and these public reps that come over there, it's a fixed match, okay? Most of the questions are planted. Most of the questions are planted. I repeat, the person there in the line is also a person of there at top. They have some understanding. So it's all hunky-dory, right? It's all hunky-dory. Nothing's happening in Brampton. So this guy, basically, he just came out of the woodwork. He skipped the queue. So basically at start, they say, hey, please don't skip the queue. He was so frustrated. He stood up. He's like, screw all of you. I'm going to say this. And he's like, you guys keep saying the same things. Every time you come to these town halls, nothing changes. These extortion thingies and all these thefts and all these things don't change. Tell me one thing. If you guys can't fix this problem, how many of you are going to resign? That was a call for, that was an exasperated man. And this is the reality. Imagine even your town halls are fixed. This is what they do. And everybody knows this. Everybody knows this. There are these politicians who have their people. They have their people. And they're like, listen, I'm doing a town hall. I need to plant a question. You know, politicians do this during political trails. I'm sure you guys have seen how friendly journalists are allowed to ask questions during press conferences. Questions that will be not so spicy. Like I remember Darshan asking a question to Pierre Poilievre. And then after that, Darshan never asked a question to Pierre Poilievre. He was never allowed to ask a question to Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah.
Because that, suddenly, oh my God, this guy's asking questions. And on Pierre Poilievre, Kirk, what do you make of another conservative MP crossing the floor?
Yeah, it's oh man, there's so much situations here. It's and I'll just touch base on something you said before about the just the students coming in without background checks and how we as landed immigrants had to go through, everything from bending over and grabbing our ankles to, making sure education is good and all this. We had a family member coming into Canada, not even to visit us. They were out in Ontario, crossing from the US because they were on a vacation there. And the border patrol, the CBSA, is okay. Show me how much money you have in your bank account. They're coming in with the family just to Niagara Falls over there, and he couldn't believe that they had that much money in his bank account. He's like, you can't have that much money and come in. It's like, well, I'm a doctor. We're educated. My wife is a doctor. Like we're not like poor. It's like, no, you can't be coming in with this much money into Canada. It's like, they went through questioning for like 3 hours before they were allowed into Canada. And I'm like, and now you can and now anyone can just fly in or walk in illegally and just claim asylum. It's absolutely insane. But going to this question about the floor crossing, the last election, the Conservative Party of Canada appointed politicians to run in riding. They didn't have an election. They didn't have a democratic election in many places. They kicked out specific local politicians or favorite for specific groups of people so that they can run there. And some of the politicians, like this last one, this Michael Mall, whatever his name is, he was one of those. He was appointed by the CPC and then crossed over. And this is after him having also connection to the Chinese Communist Party. He spoke out against Aaron O'Toole. He spoke out against Pierre Poilievre. He was saying that the CPC is not nice enough to the Communist Party of Canada, and they still appointed him. So whose fault is it?
But why don't MPs cross over to the Conservative Party from the Liberal Party? Why is it always one way?
No. In I think 2018, Liberal MP Leona Elleslev had crossed over from Liberals to Conservatives, and that was when Justin Trudeau had a majority. So it does happen.
Yeah, very rarely. It's there's a lot of rumors of other MPs crossing over. there's some conservative MPs that are not running, already announced their departure essentially. Aaron Gunn, thank goodness, decided not to run for the BC Conservatives, so he's not going to resign his seat, which would be a huge blow to the CPC. But it's when you make your own bed, which is what the CPC does, you don't have to right to blame someone else. Right? They've selected they carefully selected the politicians that want to represent them. Right? They thought they're going to get a majority to last election. They were so confident that they were going to walk away with a majority that they didn't even need to even put a serious platform together. They were good enough with just putting Pierre Poilievre and his wife's photos everywhere, and that would do it. Of course, that wasn't the case. Even Mark Carney had to tell Pierre at the debate, listen, I'm not Justin Trudeau, so stop referring to things that are from the past because we're not the same person. So it's hard. Everyone loves in politics to blame the other side, but at some point we have to take ownership of what we do on our side before we can fix something else.
True. I think the fundamental mistake on conservatives' part was to start believing that they had the election in the bag with a huge majority, not just a majority, maybe a super majority, 220, 230 seats like. And then they started believing that they could do anything and it won't affect the outcome. Then Trump threw a curveball and they were unable to recalibrate their pitch to Canadians, because they had not given a thought to any strategy, as Kirk said. They didn't even put together a proper platform. So, yeah, it's a self-inflicted wound.
I'll just say the quiet part out loud. It's always about where the money comes from.
True.
In politics, it's always about where the money comes from. I always tell people, there's this veneer, and I say this with no shame. There was this, I call it first world arrogance. It's first world arrogance where these things happen in these shitty third world countries where politicians take money. These things don't happen in our politicians are squeaky clean. The amount of shit I know about the Conservative Party of Canada, the amount of shit I know about them, amount of shady fundraisers they've done, it happens with the Liberals too. I'm not saying the Liberals are squeaky clean. They also do it. But the pretentiousness is what bothers me. It's like, as a person who is known in the Indian community now in Canada, and if I go around and I bump into these leaders, you bump into leaders because many times you are also invited as a speaker and in these community functions, and then they find out, oh, this guy's famous. Oh, this guy has access to other, money people in the community, and then suddenly requests for fundraisers come. What are those fundraisers? Who did those fundraisers for the Conservative Party of Canada? There were Facebook posts written about it. Facebook posts openly talking about it. In our community, it was because our community is very in your face. They're very in your face. If something is not that, you corrupt bastard guy. So that's how we speak. So, it's very in your face. So I remember a long ass post after the elections was written. It was like, oh, so-and-so politician. He was naming the politician, naming the Conservative Party candidate. It's like, he did this, he did this, he did this, he called him. And he was just saying it openly. And by the way, that man was not sued. I wonder why. The guy who wrote that Facebook post was not sued in a society that loves defamation and lawfare. That is Canada.
Right.
And by the lot that loves defamation and lawfare. The Khalistanis love it. And they didn't sue him. So imagine what dirt he had on them. He had the recordings. And he said, you want to mess with me? I'll play it all. Then go deal with it. Because he was an insider who got frustrated. He got hard done by.
Yes.
He was like, yo, you didn't give me what I wanted. Now I'll burn you all to the ground. So it's very common. And unfortunately, these things, People don't want to talk about it because it's like, just like, there are truisms like Canada's healthcare works. These are truisms. Another truism is that Canadian politicians can't be corrupt. These are truisms. These are prophecies that we tell ourselves. I'm not saying Indian politicians are corrupt. At least they're openly corrupt. We know they're corrupt. And the discussion is, the baseline is, yeah, they're corrupt. We just pick our devil. Here, the devil has a veil on. So that's the only difference. Another news segment that was very interesting. I don't know if you guys saw this. Licenses revoked from 3 driving schools. It's more than that. The entire list is available here. So here's the thing, Kirk. Let me give you a background about this. Check who the transportation minister is. Check who gave these licenses. Check who's canceling them.
Same guy.
Same person. The person who gave the licenses is the same person. The person canceling them is the same person. Now ask yourself, Kirk, why?
Yeah, it's it's the same in the trucking industry. I mean, we all know it. It's there's nothing hidden about it. It's even in Alberta, finally, after everything that we posted about it, they canceled. I don't even want to say canceled. They slapped in the wrist like 16 operators, 16 schools, but nothing was revoked. There's nobody goes to jail. There's no fine that's big enough to, put anyone out of business, or, it's like, you did something bad. We have to show that we're doing something about it. Okay, here are the keys. Go for a vacation for a week. Come back to it next week. It's a rotating door. It's it's just smoke and mirrors. It's the Canadian society. If we don't want to put a stop to anything, right? We just want to give the illusion that we're doing something about something. But we just don't have the guts to fix anything. There's no ambition to fix things, and you see it in every part of our society.
No, I think one reason is the stage that our economy is in. We are not creating anything new. So it's only these scams and grift that are keeping the wheels moving. So if we stop that, then everything grinds to a halt.
Yeah, people are saying to you,
we're not an innovation-based economy.
No.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Just one more bit. This is something that I think all 3 of us have been hammering in our own individual way. And this is about deportations. And I have no problem saying it. I'm sitting in India right now, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm saying, many people deserve to be deported to India and many other countries. I have no problem in saying that. Look at me. I'm sitting in India, Mumbai right now, and I'm saying many people deserve to be sent back to India from Canada. So this was a news segment. I want to play this.
The Canada Border Services Agency is removing about 400 people a week from the country, a pace of deportation not seen in over a decade.
Overwhelmingly, it is refugee claimants, failed refugee claimants who are being removed in these numbers.
This refugee lawyer says the government may be preparing for its border bill, C-12, which it hopes to pass in the spring.
Our concern is that it will continue to rise once the border bill is passed, and that it is a ramping up to basically prepare both for the increased number of deportations that will happen and also for them to be able to do them as speedily as possible.
Removals dropped below 10,000 a year during the COVID pandemic, but have since surged back. The numbers for the current fiscal year are on track to set a new record high of about 22,000. The cost of all those deportations has also increased to nearly $80 million this year. CBSA says it costs between $3,000 and $4,000 on average to remove someone who leaves willingly without the need for escort. When deportees have to be escorted out of the country, the average cost more than triples.
Just to be clear,
the Kearney government, under its border plan, already gave CBSA an additional $30 million to pay for up to 20,000 removals per year this year and next. The agency says it's on track to deport even more than that. Not all deportees came as asylum seekers. Some came as foreign workers and international students, only to see the rules get tighter.
You might say, well, there are just more and more people who are removable and we have to deal with them. It's important to think about how policy choices create more deportable people.
The Carney government has said it wants to slow population growth in Canada, and it appears to be succeeding. Canada's population actually dropped in the last fiscal quarter by 76,000 people, the largest quarterly drop ever recorded. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
So, Kirk, our favorite topic, deporting people. What do you have to say about this?
Well, it would be much cheaper to deport people if we didn't have those people that shouldn't be here to begin with. If you give criminals asylum cases, you realize 4 years later that you need to deport them. Maybe stop giving criminals asylum cases to begin with, right? Like, we are immigrated terrorists into Canada that have been on videos chopping heads of people for ISIS. Literally to marketing people for ISIS on video, became Canadian citizens. It's absolutely insane what's happening. So if we want this, overall thing to be easier and cheaper, fix the originality of the problem to begin with, which is the Canadian immigration system, which is open to scams, open to fraud. It's open to everything but accountability. So this is where we start. It's the deportation is the tail end of the issue, right? It's the very final end of everything that's happening. So to get to that, it's even a miracle in our society. Canada has thousands of people missing in the country that they don't even know where they are, right? This is the deportation is the very least and last of all the issues that's happening here.
Yeah, a couple of points. Kirk earlier said a number, but I think the actual number of asylum claimants is more than 500,000, not 200 something thousand.
No, the current backlog is 290.
No.
The current asylum that already approved is 500,000.
Yeah. 500,000. Now, if we deport at the rate of 400 a week, it will take you 23 years to just finish this lot. Today, Globe and Mail has a story saying that there are about 600 people with criminal convictions who are missing. They are supposed to be deported, but nobody knows where they are, including 400 plus who were convicted for violent crimes. So, this has been kind of left in a very lenient policy environment for far too long. So I don't think this can be brought under control unless we take very strict measures. But the moment you talk about strict measures, then everybody starts talking about Trump, and that is the Trump card, pun intended. In Canada, the moment you say Trump, then it's a conversation stopper. So, I don't know how long this deportations will continue and whether they can increase, because we have got like decades long backlog of people to deport. I don't think it's feasible.
I think these things can be easily fixed. I think Justin Trudeau has been the biggest contributor to deportations because he messed the economy so nicely that most are going back anyway. Like, this news is not a joke. Like, Indian students are just walking away from Canada, and Indian students were 37% of the international students. They no longer are interested. Obviously, content creators like me and many others who have spoken about and have openly said Indian students should not come to Canada for their own safety, because who wants to be sexually trafficked and humanly trafficked in a first world country? At least, and for those who don't understand, things are that bad that the Indian consulate in Toronto had to create a special women's assistance cell. So don't take this lightly, please. Again, get over these lofty notions that these things don't happen in your country. They happen in your country, Canadians. You're just not aware of it. Maybe because brown people are going through it. Maybe because of that, because you guys have not solved the Air India bombing and since 1980s. So People need a reality check. That is point number one. Most people are going back. The asylum claims are literally for those who have spent too much. Let's say if I've spent like 100,000 Canadian to leave, the shady way of coming to Canada, I'm going to try my level best to find weird ways of staying back in Canada because I've invested too much in it. That's the problem. And I want to remind people, like, I'm from Mumbai. There is a western suburb in Mumbai called Goregaon. In the year 2017, 2018, 2019, there is a giant ground, like thousands of square feet, where open exhibitions are done by different companies for different things. And one of the times every year we have this large fair where all international universities come over there in Mumbai. It happens in Mumbai, Delhi, Bengaluru, Chennai, different places of India, right? And universities from different part of the world come here. So I moved to Canada in 22, right? But before that, I was just living in Mumbai. And I clearly remember in 17, 18, 19, the giant ground in Goregaon, it's basically NESCO. It's called NESCO. It's an abbreviation. It's a giant name I don't want to give. So in NESCO grounds, Canadians, imagine, were hiring and renting 50% of that giant ground. More than the Americans, the Europeans, the Aussies, the Kiwi combined. Half was Canadian. And I used to wonder, I was like, what the hell is happening in Canada? Listen, I had no plan to migrate to Canada. I had no intention. It's just a personal tragedy in my family happened and I had to go there. But I was watching and I was like, yo, what are these Indians going to do there? And a lot of times those kids used to know Bhaiya. I was like, brother. The translation of Bhaiya is brother. And they would tell me, like, Bhaiya, they are saying that eventually we're going to get PR. Openly. The Canadians were marketing it as a PR tool, not an education tool. It was, and these are not shady Brampton diploma mills.
No.
These are proper Canadian universities and colleges. A lot of white people there. It was a clear system. It was told, Indians in India were told you'll get PR. They're like, okay, if they're giving PR, we'll go there. Because before those years, do you know where Indians went the most? To study. The United States of America.
Right.
The United Kingdom. You look at the numbers, they change after. They're like, no, see, if Canada is giving a decent education plus PR, then we'll pick Canada over USA. Otherwise, they were all going to USA. And the numbers match, right? I think, Darshan, you have shared it independently. Kirk, you have shared that 148 or 49 million were spent by the Canadian government on this international student saga.
Right.
Now you know where it was spent. I saw it with my own eyes in my city, in Mumbai, and in various parts of India. So we have to remember that these people were encouraged. But before we go, I wanted to share a few charts that, Kirk, you had shared. This is about Canada's economy and the GDP. So this is the real GDP growth rate. I'm going to share all the charts you've shared with your post, where you said Canada's real GDP has contracted by 0.3% in October. Goods producing industries were down 0.7%. Manufacturing sector contracted by 1.5% and is at a multi-year low. Congratulations to every Canadian. Let's start with this chart first.
Yeah, so what a lot of people don't know, that Canada's share of GDP for manufacturing, like in the 1960s, was just over 20% of our economy. Because at one point, we actually used to make things, which is quite amazing. Now, fast forward a few years, a couple decades later, and 25% of our labor force works for the government, works for a government. So they produce nothing. And you can see the direct share of our GDP entering that phase. And now we're essentially around 10 to 11% of our GDPs in manufacturing. So it's over half of what it was 40 years ago. Our exports, about 60% of our exports is manufacturing related. So, you either export services or goods. And if you don't manufacture goods, guess what? You have nothing to export. And this has been one of the issues in Canada. And what masks all of it is essentially our oil and gas. If you remove energy trade from our trade balance, Canada's had a trade deficit with the world for over 16 years because we don't have anything to export except resources. And this is one of the biggest problems. And as our GDP is still shrinking once in a while, it's I don't think it's doing as bad as people make it out to be, even though it was negative into last month. The problem with that, our share of it from manufacturing continues to shrink. So we make less and less. Out of the PMI index, the S&P manufacturing index, the only contracted manufacturing sector in the world out of the developed economies is in Canada. So we can't blame Trump. We can't blame Trump for the last 40 years. We can't blame Trump for the last 10 years, for the last 16 years. This is an issue, is that we don't make anything anymore. We don't intend to make anything. And I think this is a crucial point here. And as you guys pointed out correctly, and this is where the students scam came from as well. It's okay, let's bring a whole bunch of people that will consume things. They'll give a boost to our economy. All of a sudden, mob pie, schools open up in different places. It's like, okay, let's live off someone else somewhere else. Let's manufacture, again, diploma mills, right? It's let's manufacture real estate. Let's create a false bubble in our economy, but no one wants to actually fix things. And I think I'll give Mark Carney a credit here, because I think he is trying to do some of the right thing with the resource development, with expediting thing. The unfortunate thing, he's making his environmental past as a condition to progress for our future, which I think is a mistake.
Yeah. So I think Kirk is frozen for some odd reason.
Yeah.
Because we just can't grow our economy without the manufacturing leading the way.
Yeah, but I want to talk about, you mentioned the diploma mills and the carnage that is coming, and this is really so in my view, what the Canadians were doing is that they went away from a resource economy. And again, this is another chart that you shared, where how much of Canada's global trade balance is to basically how much Canada relies on oil and gas just as an economy. Even now, it's essentially oil and gas that is bailing Canadians out. And what Trudeau and his minions essentially did, and it was lobbied heavily, I have no shame in saying that, lobbied heavily by the Khalistanis. This mass immigration nonsense that happened was a complete Khalistani lobbying effort, and tons of money was poured in. And today, look at the cascading effects of it. Like I shared the data of Mississauga and Brampton Transit. They're done so. Like they are in trouble. Even Kitchener. I mean, look at Kitchener-Conestoga, even the college itself. Then look at St. Clair College. There are mass layoffs coming now in the university education system, and that's a major part of Ontario and its economy is this education and all of this. Ontario benefited a lot from this mass immigration thing, a lot. Why, provinces like Alberta and other provinces, they might come out of this mess because they actually have a real economy, and provinces like, again, this is Kirk's chart where he showed how Canada's LNG exports have risen over the years. Although I get worried with the tapering off over here. That should not happen. That shouldn't happen. But listen, Canada is a resource economy. Why do Canadians have a problem with that? Like, why? What's the big deal?
Because in 2015, after being elected Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau said that we want to grow our economy from the heart out. Now we know what it looks like, and it rhymes with heart but doesn't smell as good.
No, but it's ridiculous. Like, people need a reality check. Like, you created basically the entire mass immigration, it's actually, everybody knows why it was done. They did not, do the normal model in Canada, which is dig, find things to sell and sell them. Right. In some cases, they do the second stage, which is refining. In the case of oil, most of the refining is done by the United States of America. Most of it. I'm not saying all of it before somebody, kind of fact checks me. But it is so ridiculous that they basically put a band-aid on a stab wound, which was this whole mass immigration coming in. And what it created was, it created social fissures and economic problems. The real estate bubble and many other things that were a cascading effect of that. Today, whether it's Mississauga, whether it's all of Toronto, the transit is suffering. Many other things are, suffering. Restaurants are suffering. A lot of you're going to have ghost towns now. At least in and around GTA, you're going to have ghost towns. Real estate developers made a killing. Now they're going to lose all their money. So, I mean, I don't care. That's the free hand of the market. You go up, you go down. But the point is that, why do Canadians have an allergy to oil and gas? Why?
Okay, there is some background here. First of all, Justin Trudeau's cabinet had Stephen Guilbeault, who is a kind of a fanatic environmentalist. And
Not kinda, he is.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
is. And even before that, there is an excellent documentary by Vivian Krause called Over a Barrel. It was released in the heyday of COVID, where she has shown with documentary evidence how the American lobbies, pro-oil lobbies, are involved in funding anti-oil and gas activism in Canada, so that the United States benefits. See, we are selling to them. We have only one customer for oil, and maybe 80% of our gas goes to the United States, something like that. So they are more or less a monopoly buyer of our oil and gas. And we have to sell to them at a heavy discount because we don't have any other customers, right? It's something like $20 a barrel. Now, when you're looking at even 1 million barrels a day, that's $20 million a day multiplied by whatever number of days in a year. So they are massively behind it. The thing to do for a sensible government would have been to counter that effect rather than add to it. So at one point, Justin Trudeau's government was paying grants to the activist group which was opposing the oil pipeline which Justin Trudeau's government had bought. So we were paying both. Talk about burning the candle from both the ends. Taxpayer money was used to buy the pipeline, but then taxpayer money was being given to people who were opposing that pipeline. So that's where we are. Governance has to be there is an excellent clip from the British show Yes Minister, where the minister gets all, moral, and some British arms were being sold to Italian red terrorists, and he says it is wrong, we have to stop it. And Sir Humphrey tells him that government is not about right and wrong. It's about preventing anarchy, preventing chaos, being there for yet another day. It's not about good. So these guys got deeply into ideological stance where everything was seen through the lens of either evil or the opposite of evil, something noble to do. That's not how you operate a government. It has to be completely objective. What benefits my people? I'll do that. That is how, the strength of Canada as it existed before had been built. They did not stop to think that, how this will look or this doesn't comport with this ideology. No, they did whatever was good. Whatever the energy infrastructure that we have put was put in place with that kind of objective approach. That's the way to do it.
Kirk.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. It's the mass immigration that Canada that the Liberals executed was essentially a quantitative easing. You can look at it that way. But the problem is they didn't even care for any or even consider any of the side effects. So we went from bad policy to even a worse reaction, right? Our housing to money printing, everything that's around it to satisfy the side effects, the consequences of it is causing much more damage than the year or two of somewhat positive GDP numbers we came out of it. Now, the reality is to get rid of this stimulus and repair the cost of it is going to be much more expensive, and it requires really daring action that will not come from a positive light. One of the things that Canada, for some reason, does not like to admit that it's a very easy country to manage and govern if you just get out of the way, if you just don't do stupid things. We are a rock and dirt economy. That's our foundation. We plant things if we need more money. We dig things if we need more money. It's as simple as that. So we have a base to our economy that is so productive, so solid in what we have under our feet, that we think that we have this altruism that we are like, oh, we can expand to different things and fix the pollution around the world if we just handicap ourselves. That will cure what China is doing, right? It makes absolutely no sense. And we, because of this altruistic view and egotism and just pure delusional, we created so many of our own obstacles, so much of our own red tape that our own government does not know how to navigate this. And this is the problem. The Darshan example with this pipeline, the private sector was going to build it for $6 billion. It cost the taxpayers $34 billion to build this pipeline that the private sector was going to do. Why did it cost $34 billion? Because the government couldn't navigate their own red tape. They had to stop for a week here because a hawk had a nest. They had to stop there for 2 weeks because a frog was giving birth. And they had to. It was just nonstop like that, right? It was just so mismanaged, and this is one of the issues. Is we just have no idea how to get things done without any excuses. Now it's and that pipeline, by the way, is so productive. It's going to pay us $1.7 billion this year in royalties, which is insane. Right? If it costs us $6 billion, let's say $10 billion to actually build it, what a phenomenal return that would have been. It still is if they could sell it. But it's it's mindless. And now we're talking about another pipeline to the West Coast, and again we're back to square one. It's like, well, we have to talk to every single person that lives along the way, every single First Nation. We have to give them money so they can have ownership for some particular reason. Nobody knows why, but that's the way it is. And again, we're making the same mistake. Well, there is no private sector proponent. Well, the last time there was one, you chased them out of the country. So, how do you bring in private capital money when you keep chasing it away? And this is the issue, is that Canada is so easy to manage because we have this beautiful foundation of resources and land that people think they're brilliant here. Our politicians think they're, our public sector think they're geniuses, that they can run things. It's like, you don't have to do anything. You just have to let the private sector build, and you have capital coming in. You're not inventing anything. You're not building anything. You're just digging a hole in the ground, and that pays half of our bills. It's magical, right? But we have to make our own problems because it's, for some reason, human nature over here. And nobody wants to get out of the way, and everyone wants to be the champion of a new idea. It's instead of just make things, just do it, like Nike said.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, there is this particular news segment. It's a while ago. It was reported on the 16th and updated on the 17th of December. And I don't want to discuss the news, but I want to discuss Canadian media per se, and why I find more and more the Canadian media to be so dishonest and so annoying. So there was this news that had come out in the Canadian media. The Globe and Mail had reported about Prabjot Singh. All right. So the story is that Prabjot basically had appealed that he doesn't want to basically do. He did not want to swear oath to the king, as it goes against his religious beliefs, and it was first turned down. Then later on, it was shown that the court appeal called the mandatory oath quote a clear and significant infringement of his religious freedom. The requirement to take oath of allegiance forced the appellant to choose between following his religious convictions or practicing law in his home province. He could not have both, said Tuesday's decision, which came after 14 months after the appeal was heard. Chief Justice Ritu Kullar, Justice Bernard Ho, and Justice Joshua Hawkes unanimously agreed. They outlined 3 options for the government to address what they call a constitutional defect: do away with the oath entirely, make it optional, or amend its wording. And I mean, that one debate is, what is the identity of Canada, etc., etc. But that would need too many hours, and I don't want to be. But I want to share some more information about Prabjot. All right, this was reported by on the news beat, a very good journalist, independent journalist V. He's nobody in the Canadian media. He quote tweeted this article, Prabjot Singh, and if you guys can see, this is Prabjot. All right, this is Prabjot. Now, where is Prabjot speaking is a very important bit that I want to talk about. Prabjot is essentially, he is, participating. He participated in the Hope Foreign Interference Inquiry too. And he also flew to UK to participate in an event featuring recruitment for ISYF as well as speakers from the group. ISYF is a Canadian listed terrorist group that Moninder Buell, who recently called for a holy religious war in Surrey, is trying to bring to Canada. Are we that naive that Canadian media does not know about these things? Journalists like, who's that guy, Darshan? Wo Stuart Bell, right? Kya naam hai uska wo?
Stuart
My
Bell.
favorite. Stuart Bell,
Stuart
my personal favorite. A person, he has a thing against the Indian government. Clearly, he has a thing against the Indian government. Stuart Bell has that. He has a unique talent. In articles where there is a blatant problem of the Khalistanis, he somehow, like a great Indian jalebi, it's a round sweet where you keep rotating it around in circles.
Yeah, it's like a pretzel.
Yeah, it's like a pretzel. And he will, like a jalebi or a pretzel, rotate it somehow and bring it to the Indian government. How the Indian government is oppressing these people. Kirk, how do we as Canadians, or how does an average person following Canada get anything out of this media where these guys, part of actual listed terrorist groups, are being portrayed as heroes?
This ruling in general is really bizarre, because the judge here missed the biggest part of the issue here. This has nothing to do with the religious thing. It has nothing to do with anything, because the Canada system is a let me just open this for a second. The judge called it a constitutional defect, right? The issue is the Crown of Canada is the whole conversation here. And when you swore loyalty to Canada, to the Canadian state and constitution, you swear to this crown, which is part of the representation here, and the king and the monarchy is part of the system here. That's why the king came and gave a speech at our throne when Mark Carney was elected. So the fact that judge here even ruled it as some kind of religious thing is just so wrong, because this swearing to this to loyalty to the Canadian state and constitution is the bare minimum of citizenship in Canada. Never mind a lawyer that should be representing the crown or the government in general. So this is such a almost a blow to our identity if we're talking about identity, but it's completely erroneous to even say what the judge said. Never mind that, you know, this was a perfect example of people who have different plans for Canada, within Canada, in Canada, how they test the system, how they try to find loopholes to the system, how they change the system from within the system to benefit them. That's all this was about. It was about testing and weakening our system against us.
True. And you know, one thing that I haven't seen anyone comment on this case, I think about 8 or 9 years ago, there was an alleged plot to bomb a via rail from Toronto to Montreal. 2 men were charged, and one of them made the argument that he cannot be tried under Canadian law because he only recognizes Islamic law.
Sharia law, yeah.
Right? And then the court rejected the argument, but now this case reopens that argument, that if a lawyer is allowed to refuse to take an oath to the crown because it violates his religious rights, then can an accused be forced to go through a legal system which is under that crown in violation of their religious beliefs? This is a very dangerous opening, and I'm sure this has been noted by the Islamists and they will use it at some point. So as Kirk said, you know, these guys are basically bad players. They are always pushing to see where they get an opening, where they get a loophole, and weaken Canada from within. Now, as for my opinion about Canadian media, I mean, everybody knows what my opinion is. I don't hold them in high regard. I don't hold them in any regard, barring specific individuals whom I respect a lot, who do fact-based reporting and who don't inject their ideology or their opinion in their reporting. And when they do state their opinion, they say that this is an opinion. So those few individuals I respect a lot, but otherwise Canadian media, especially mainstream media, is too far gone for any reform. They will be that way until, you know, everything goes kaboom and then something else replaces them. Until then, they are beyond redemption.
So,
if I can just add to this, okay, this is when you swear oath to citizenship to Canada. This is the first part of it. I swear that I'll be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, King of Canada, his higher successors, and that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada. So now the judge rules this is somehow a constitutional defect. No, that's literally what you swear for to become a Canadian citizen. So it was such a bizarre ruling because it's essentially could, well, I guess, void any citizenships or swearing of the oath. And by the way, if you don't pronounce it, if the people at the swearing ceremony don't hear you say it, you may not even get your citizenship. So it was such a bizarre and complete surrender of what Canada is in this ruling that it's hard to even make sense of it. And again, nobody pointed it out in the media. Yeah. Absolutely nobody.
Talks about the Khalistani influence on the Canadian body politic, which nobody wants to accept. They have disproportionate influence. As far as this is concerned, this ruling is what in Indian judicial discourse would be called the essential religious practices doctrine. This is what it is. It is a giant problem in India, where a lot of times I recently did a podcast with a friend of mine, Nikhil Mehra, on 2 or 3 Indian cases about the burqa and where should a burqa be allowed. Should a burqa be allowed in a private institution or in a college, publicly funded college, and stuff like that? It was a mishmash of all these things, and it all boils down to, a lot of Islamists in India also play this essential religious practices doctrine, and unfortunately the courts in India have kind of legitimized this our ERP doctrine, and they, a lot of times they have rejected things by saying this is not an essential religious practice. My whole problem with this whole thing is every country has its own essence, and if Canada's essence is the monarchy, like, that's why I will never take a Canadian citizenship. I will not. I refuse to pay allegiance to the crown. It's deeply problematic for me at an individual level. I just think monarchies are stupid. There, I'm saying it very openly. Monarchies are stupid. Whether it's an Indian monarchy or an English monarchy, I just think it's stupid that I'm paying allegiance to a monarchy, which is why I will never take a Canadian citizenship. I don't want Canada to change its system to each its own. It's fine. It's all good, man. We're all good. I'm a landed immigrant. I'm happy there. I don't want it. If Canada changes it in the future, we'll think about it. But I don't want to do it. But I don't like this idea of, different religious groups carving out different religious excuses. What if tomorrow that religion says, well, female genital mutilation is part of my culture and my essential religious practice, and you know what? I want to allow. You know why? Because in India, now this is a criticism of India, you have civil Sharia law. Yes, an Indian Muslim man is allowed to have 4 wives. An Indian Muslim man is allowed to use talaq in the Islamic sense, not the instant talaq, which I think is talaq-e-biddat. And there are 2 kinds of talaq. The instant one, finally, a couple of years ago, was struck down. Instant one, but the long-term one is still allowed. And barbaric practices like nikah halala are still legal. I can warn Canadians, this is coming there. This is coming. You're going to have that.
Nikah halala is happening.
In Canada?
Yes.
Hey Ram.
Yeah, it's happening. It has just not come
Must
on
be
the
illegal.
radar. Yeah, it has not come on the radar.
This is one of the reasons why they don't let people know the sex of the baby after a certain age, is because of certain religious practices and ideologies, right? It's because they will, if it's a girl,
Abort
it's
the baby.
yeah.
Anyways, we'll wrap up this discussion. Kirk, Darshan, thank you very much for coming and sharing your point of view. And
pleasure, gentlemen.
Yeah, and we continue in this entertaining time that Canada is going through, and I think it's overall. I'm an eternal optimist, so I always believe things will get better. I'm an eternal optimist. But guys, we'll wrap up right now. You can go follow both Kirk and Darshan. The details to their X handle is there in the description of the podcast. Darshan also has his own blog where he writes regularly. Kirk has his own Substack. You can also go and subscribe to Kirk's Substack. As far as I'm concerned, you know the drill. This podcast runs only on small monthly membership donations. Whether on X, you can become a subscriber there. You can become a patron on Patreon, or you can become a member on YouTube. If you want to send one-time donations through Interact Canada, the email ID is kushalmehra81@gmail.com. The UPI ID for India is kushalmehra@ICICI. If you can't do any of that, just like this video, subscribe to the Cārvāka podcast YouTube channel, and if you're an audio listener, leave a rating. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, this is Kushal Mehra signing off. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.